Hello everyone and welcome back to my YouTube channel. So today I'm hitting you guys with another video all about writing structure, and today we're going to be covering the 7-point structure. So if you missed my last writing structure video, I talked all about how to write romance books structure. I will have it linked down below. Definitely go and check it out. And today we are going to be covering the 7-point structure, which, fun fact, is one of my favorite structures to use in my own writing. And like my last video about writing structure, I am covering every possible question that I could think of regarding 7-point structure, but if I miss any of your questions, make sure to comment them down below. Question number 1, what is writing structure and why is it important? If this question sounds familiar to you, it's because I said this exact same question in my other video, but in case you didn't watch it, wanted to mention it here. If you already know this, feel free to skip ahead a little bit. But writing structure is the building blocks of your writing. It's what's going to piece together the events in your book and is going to make it a coherent story. I know that a lot of writers will sometimes think that outlining or plotting and even structuring your novel is going to make it boring or is going to ruin your creative process. But in my opinion, it definitely shouldn't do that, because the entire point of a writing structure is to both help you to be creative. Because personally, whenever I do these structure videos, I almost always get at least one story idea when I'm scripting these videos, because writing structure is the crux of your story. And if you're struggling to create story ideas, literally just start playing around with structure and you can probably come up with something. And I can almost guarantee that even if you are new to writing structure, you have heard of at least one writing structure, and that is Freytag's pyramid, because every fucking English teacher teaches about Freytag's pyramid. Freytag's pyramid is the one where you have the inciting incident, then you have the rising action, which is like the start of the roller coaster, then you have the climax, which is like the peak of your story, peak of the roller coaster, then you have the falling action, is like when you go down to the bottom, then the resolution, where you pull into that little thing that roller coasters go, and yay, it's over, and that's the end of your story. Freytag's pyramid is just one example of a structure. The 7-point structure is, in my opinion, very similar to Freytag's pyramid, but will give you just a teeny bit more of direction. But there are obviously lots of other structure types out there, like the hero's journey structure, for example. Question number 2, what is the 7-point structure? You'll never guess. It is a structure with 7 points. Oh my god, revolutionary, I know. So the 7-point structure consists of the hook, plot point 1, plot point 2, the midpoint, pinch point 1, pinch point 2, and the resolution. And according to my research, there are 2 main reasons that writers will use the 7-point structure. The first reason is that writers want to have a structure that is a little bit more guided than something like Freytag's pyramid, but they don't want something that's super guided because they like to have a lot of creative wiggle room. I feel like this structure would be very good for anyone who is a pantser or a plancer. I think this could be a structure that's worthwhile for you to check out. And then the other reason that I saw online that I actually didn't even know was a thing was, and now I can't unsee it, which is how symmetrical the 7-point structure is. Because if you were to dot it out on a line, you have the midpoint, then you have the pinch points, then you have the plot points, then you have the hook and the resolution. It's very symmetrical, it's very pleasing, and because it's symmetrical, it can make plotting your book a lot easier, because plot point 1 and plot point 2 are usually going to be related. So when you plot those at the same time, it makes it easier to plot out how the book ends and how it begins. And then when you plot out the pinch points, it makes it easier to plot out those plot points, so on and so forth. It can make plotting the book a lot easier. And I think that this can work really well for writers who really struggle to generate ideas for their work, because I think this can really give you a starting point for sure. The third question is, what genres does the 7-point structure work for? So if you missed my last video about writing structure, in a nutshell, every single genre is going to have a structure that is a little bit different from other genres, because that's how genres and reader expectations work. Which is why I wanted to mention that the 7-point structure, since it's such a vague structure, will work for literally any genre. However, what I will say is that you are going to probably need to use a certain structure that is a little bit more specific to your genre in conjunction with the 7-point structure. So for example, you could use the romance structure that I listed in my last video in conjunction with the 7-point structure, or you could use something like the hero's journey if you're writing fantasy. Question number 4 is, what types of writers would the 7-point structure work best for? I kind of already mentioned the points I'm going to cover here, but I just want to have them all in one point. I think there are 4 main instances where the 7-point structure might be for you. Number 1, you are not a hardcore plotter, you are more so a pantser or a planter. If that is the case, the 7-point structure could be a really good structure for you, because while there is definitely a structure to your book and it will help make sure that your book isn't just a series of unrelated events and there is a structure to it, it's also going to be vague enough to where you can play around with it, and it links to the second reason you might want to use it, which is that if you like to pair different structures together. So some writers will completely use multiple structures. So for example, you will completely figure out the 7-point structure and completely figure out the 3-act structure and completely figure out the romance structure listed in my last video. Other writers will combine these. So if you like combining structures, then the 7-point structure could be a structure that you might want to be combining your story with. The third instance where the structure might work for you is if you are really intimidated by the idea of structuring your book. This is something that I see all the time, and there's good reason for it. It can honestly be super intimidating to structure an entire book all by yourself, especially when it can feel really isolating and it can be really confusing because there's a lot of structures floating around online and it can be really hard to figure out which one works best for you in your book. So if you want to start out with something small, I think that the 7-point structure is definitely something worthwhile to consider. The fourth and last reason that the 7-point structure might work well for you is if you are needing the structure for your subplots. So a lot of people don't talk about the structure about subplots, mostly because since it is a subplot, it's less complicated than the main plot and it's not at the focal point of your book. There's not a need for a really complicated structure for it. However, there does need to be some resemblance of a structure to your subplots, because in my opinion, this is one of the biggest reasons why readers might not like your book, because if the subplot sucks, then they're not going to enjoy the story. Most of the time, at least. Some readers might still enjoy it, but it will definitely bring down the enjoyment of your book. And I think using a vague structure like the 7-point structure is perfect for subplots, and this is personally what I use for all of my subplots because it just works super fucking well in my opinion. And also, bonus reason number 5, I think that this could work well, is if you are writing a book that requires more than 3 perspectives. For example, I'm in the process of outlining a book that has 5 perspectives. That has been hell, and I started the structure process actually for the first time with the 7-point structure because I was really overwhelmed with trying to figure out how each of these stories were going to be structured, especially because there are 3 different stories that are going on into the book, and kind of trying to intertwine them was really difficult. So I started off with the 7-point structure, and that helped me so much plotting it. Like, it was insane. It was super helpful. So that is another instance I think where the structure could really work for you. Next, we have question number 5, which is the most obvious one, which is, how do I use the 7-point structure to structure my book? Well, congratulations. I'm going to walk you through the 7-point structure right now. So the first point on the 7-point structure is going to be the hook. The hook is what hooks your reader into the story. This could literally be anything. This could be the introduction of a subplot. This could be a meet cute. This could be a battle. It could be a line. It honestly doesn't matter. Just something intriguing that's going to captivate the reader and get them interested into your book. Next in the structure, we have plot point number 1, which is basically the inciting incident. This is the first action that your MC takes that thrusts them into the action of the story. So for example, in a romance book, this could be the meet cute. In a fantasy book, maybe this is when they enlist themselves in a war. Point number 1 is the first moment in your story where you are going to raise the stakes. So typically this is going to be when you introduce your antagonist, villain, or overall conflict of the story. Then we have the midpoint. The midpoint is the turning point in the story where your MC is going to go from passive to active. Previous to this, your MC might have taken a couple actions, but typically there is not going to be a whole lot of action from them. But then this is the point where they go, no, I'm going to do something, and basically alters the point of the story, which is why it's also known as the turning point in your story. Then we have pinch point 2, which is going to be the worst point in your story. So basically, think about the worst possible thing that could happen, make it so. In romances, this is usually when the couple is broken up. In fantasy, maybe someone dies, maybe a lot of people die, maybe your MC almost dies. If you're writing a fantasy romance, maybe your MC's love interest almost dies and the MC breaks up with them because they're so scared because they thought they were going to lose them. Then we have plot point 2, where the MC discovers something that helps them to defeat the antagonist, villain, or conflict of the story. No, this doesn't have to be a literal thing. They don't have to be like, I found the ruby of truth and I am going to solve this war. Because in a lot of stories, this is going to be when the lie, which I covered in my last structure video, but if you don't know what the lie is, it's basically a lie that the MC believes at the start of the story. The lie is essentially the key to the resolution. So one example of what a lie a character could believe would be that their nation is good and pure, but they're not. They're fucked up. But this plot point is almost always going to be when the MC realizes that the lie isn't true and they figure out how to solve the problem. And this is also the plot point where they actually solve the problem. So yay, it's solved. Which brings us to the resolution, which is the end of your story. Everything's wrapped up in a neat little bow and your story is now over. That is the 7-point structure, which was a lot faster to cover than the last structure because it is literally half the size of the last structure. And like I said, it's a pretty vague structure. Which again is why I would say for like 99% of stories out there, I don't see how using only the 7-point structure would work unless you're doing something like a subplot, because it's very vague and most stories are going to require a lot more direction than this. But I do think it's definitely a worthwhile writing structure to know, so I definitely felt like it was worth covering it in a video, even though I'm sure this video is going to be a lot shorter than my usual content because there's honestly not a lot to cover. And that brings us to the last question, which is question number 6. I want more detail, Ren. What structures would you point me towards? So there are many structures out there, but 3 structures that I can think of at the top of my head would be Jenna Mraski's structure. Jenna covered her personal writing structure in one of her videos. I'll have it linked below if you want to check it out. Another writing structure that I reference a lot is Save a Cat Writes the Novel. I know this is originally for filmmaking, but there is a book version of it where it's like converted for novels. I'll have the book linked down below. Go check it out. And then the other structure I would mention is the hero's journey. I know I say the hero's journey a lot, but I just use it as an example a lot of the time because it's a very popular structure and a lot of you guys who are following me are probably writing fantasy. So I just felt like it's relevant to mention, and many more, I'm sure. I am still researching different types of structure, and every single time I Google different types of writing structure, I find like 5 more. So honestly, my little series of writing structure is probably never gonna end. I'm sure in 5 years I'll still be doing these videos because there's just so many different writing structures out there. So if there's any structures I didn't mention in this video, comment them down below. And with that being said, I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, please give it a big thumbs up and hit that red subscribe button down below and let me know if you use the 7-point structure, if you've heard of it, or if this is your first time hearing about it. Hopefully I did it some justice. And let me know in the comments if this video was helpful. Hopefully it was. And if you have a preference for the next writing structure that I'll be covering, let me know. With that being said, that's all that I got for you guys today. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!